So Boker Tov, it's still morning. It's good to see you all. We have a special topic for today, which is the official topic is a Purim is forever. Purim in the thought of Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner. So this is exciting because it's a fun topic, and I think there's a lot to draw out from this topic in particular for this year. So everybody should have a copy of the source sheet. It was sent out yesterday. I will share the sources on the screen in just a second. And of course, if you want to share your faces on the screen, it's always great to see beautiful smiling faces. And we talk at the screens a lot now. This is but you can imagine some Neanderthals seeing us like talking to a screen, like what is going on here? But it's always nice to see people's faces. So I will at one or 2 points in the shir just pause for questions or for comments, but otherwise let's try to create you can put your questions or chat right into the chat, and that's the easiest way. So okay, let me open up with the following idea. Okay, we're going to open up. We'll take a quick look. We'll look at the source sheet, and then I want to share a story with you about a Purim that I experienced about 20 years ago. So we're looking at the source sheet here. A Purim is forever. Purim in the thought of Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, Matan Yom Iyun 5781. Let's look at this first source in Midrash Mishlei Parashat Tet Siman Bet, which contains an idea which is actually quite bizarre and raises a number of questions for us. See, I'm seeing just anyone running the chat. Okay, good. The source sheet is in there. Tavcha tivcha masecha yena. This is a pasuk from Sefer Mishlei. Okay, what does this mean? It means that she prepared the feast and she put out the wine. Am Rabbi Abahu. What does this mean? That Rabbi Abahu says Zu Esther Malka. This is referring to Esther the queen. Shebisha shehigia tzar liYisrael. When persecution came to the Jewish people, what did she do? She organized the Suda, a feast for Achashverosh and Haman. She got them very drunk, or she strengthened the wine. Haman thought this was in his honor. He was very excited about this party that he was invited to. But little did Haman know that he was being pulled into a trap here, and through the strength of the wine, which is not explicitly mentioned in Megillat Esther, kantala umatala olam. From what I think this means, it's that she acquired for her nation eternity. That's what I think umata is, but it could be another reading of this. Af archa shulchana. This is the next words in Midrash Mishlei. She also extended. She also set the table. She set the table for this world and for the next. This is the good name that Esther acquired for herself in this world and in the next. All of the Jewish holidays are going to cease to exist. They will be nullified, null and void. We will not be celebrating Chanukah. We won't celebrate Pesach. We won't celebrate Yom Kippur, Shabbat, none of this stuff. V'mei haPurim einam betelim leolam. However, Purim will always exist. Shenemar, as it says, V'mei haPurim ha'ele lo ya'avru mitoch haYehudim. These days of Purim will never pass from the Jewish people. The eternity of Purim. A Purim is forever. Amar Rabbi Lazar, af Yom HaKippurim eino batel leolam. Rabbi Lazar adds to this and he says, guess what else is never going to cease to exist? Yom Kippur. Thank God. How could you have Jewish life without Yom Kippur? So Yom Kippur will never cease to exist. She'emar, as it says, v'ayta zot bachem l'chukat olam l'chaper al b'nei Yisrael mikol chatotechem achat b'shana. Yom Kippur is called a chok. A chok is a statute, which will never cease to exist. So we know Yom Kippur will also continue forever. And this midrash is the source for many of the connections that we make between Purim and Yom Kippur. Kippurim, Purim, Yom Kippur. I heard one interpretation of this is that on Yom Kippur, we repent for everything that we did on Purim, but the other side, there's always another side, Shivim Panim LaTorah, is that on Purim, we repent for everything that we did on Yom Kippur. So there are two ways of reading this thing, and there are many, many connections made between these two chagim. And one, of course, is elevating ourselves spiritually, we become like angels, like Malachei Hasharet. We say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto out loud. Some people wear a kittel. On the other hand, Yom Purim is the most physical, celebratory, day. We feast, we eat, we gorge ourselves, we drink, we get intoxicated. It's all about the body. It's all about the Jewish body. So the spirit, the body, so they complement each other. But here's the question that I want to raise. The question I want to raise is, of all days, Purim is going to be the chag that we continue for forever. I just want to tell you that from my own experience, Purim is definitely not a day you want to last forever. About 20 years ago, when I was studying in Bendavid-The, I'll tell you a story now. I had a very exciting Purim because I was studying in yeshiva for the year, in Yeshivat there, and I decided I was going to have an all-out Purim. I was going to experience Purim B'Yud Daled on the 14th, and then I was also going to go to Yerushalayim and experience a full Purim, extended period Purim holiday. So I remember the night at Bendavid-The, we had a feast. We read Megillah. We had a feast. Rav Sabato was giving out drinks to everybody, and that was an amazing evening of singing and dancing. And the next morning we read Megillah. We had another feast, and then I headed off to Neve Yaakov to a friend of mine who was in yeshiva. He was an elder bachor in yeshiva. His name was Zachariah Rabinovich, who was the son of the Rosh Yeshiva. He's now a very big Talmid Chacham. He's a Ram in Yeshivat Shalabim. We went to him for Sudat Purim, and it was unbelievable. I mean, he was the second he started drinking a little bit, he started sharing Divrei Torah, Masechet Bava Kamma, and quoting this and Rishonim, and it was unbelievable to see a real Talmid Chacham drunk. It was something elevating. It wasn't something that brought people down. But there were also people lying on the floor and doing this and going crazy and all these things. So that was the first part of Purim. We then went off to Yerushalayim. We went to Merkaz Harav, which was Purim, Shushan Purim, and we were at Merkaz Harav dancing and singing, and they had wine there as well. And spent a whole evening at Merkaz Harav. We went to the Kotel that night. And then in the next morning, I remember Rav Sabato was doing piyutim with Rav Nevinsol in the old city. And we went there where they celebrate Purim together. And they make up all these poems and Shirei Purim on the spot. The full day of Purim, another Seudat Purim, Shushan Purim. And I remember coming back to yeshiva at 5 p.m. that night. And I said, I'm done. I'm done with Purim. I was so exhausted and so tired and a little bit drunk, not too much, but a little bit. And I said, you know what? I don't want to have another Purim for another year. I don't want to Purim ever again, for that matter. And this is, I don't know about you, but everyone could share their own Purim experiences. Purim tends to start. Here in Israel, we celebrate Purim for like a full month. It's like a full month. The kids are already wearing their costumes, a full month beforehand. But Purim, then though it ends, it crashes and it burns. It just dies. It's like, oh my God, get me away from this. I don't want to ever celebrate this chag again. And so we have a love-hate relationship with Purim. So of all chagim that we are going to celebrate forever, Purim appears to be an interesting choice. It also reminds me of another phrase which I'm sure you've all heard before. Which is, we've all heard of a diamond is forever. Who hasn't heard of the notion of a diamond is forever? De Beers, and I'll just share the screen here for a second. The story, where does this phrase come from? A diamond is forever. And this is what it says on the De Beers website. One woman captured the strength and timelessness in 4 words. And in doing so, she captivated the world. Employed in a Philadelphia-based advertising agency, Frances Giretti was a woman working in a man's world. De Beers was her main account, one of the women's products she'd been hired to write for. 1947, she had just finished working on a series of ads and was heading to bed when she realized she'd forgotten to create a signature line for her latest campaign. Exhausted, she scribbled something on a slip of paper before falling asleep. The following morning, she presented it to a boardroom of men. Initially met with hesitancy due to its unusual style, her line, "A diamond is forever," would go on to transform both the diamond and advertising industry forever. 1999, "A Diamond Forever" was named as a slogan of the century by Advertising Age. Now, it's interesting that we say, what is the meaning of this phrase, "A diamond is forever"? Anybody want to? What does it mean? A diamond is forever. Anybody? Anybody want to tell me what this means? A diamond is forever. I'm sure there are some people here who have maybe got a diamond for an engagement ring. So maybe you could explain why did you want to get a diamond for an engagement? What do you have to say about this?
It's a dual meaning. You've got a diamond is a stone that is very hard to break. So therefore it's strong and it will last forever. And hence it became the second part of it saying, well, now it's going to represent our bond, which will be strong and never break. So that's forever.
Which is conditioned on, of course, the husband, the future husband buying a, $10,000 or $8,000 ring for his wife. So the eternity of their bond is based on the financial commitment that the husband makes at the beginning of the relationship. So it is interesting. What is it that creates this sense of everlasting foreverness? But in any case, correct. There are two meanings of this word. It is of this phrase. The diamond itself is physically one of the strongest substances known on the planet, and it's meant to symbolize the unbreakable bond that a married couple will have together if only the husband spends all this money on a diamond ring. I should mention it also creates more worry. It creates an eternal sense of worry that you lose it, you take it off, netilat yadayim, when you're and it's always you're walking in a dangerous place. You got to turn the ring. All these different things. So it creates an eternal bond of love and eternal concern that you might lose it. So this is a diamond is forever. And I want to actually think about this image. A diamond is forever in the context, and this is why I made up the title, a Purim. A Purim is forever. So what does it mean? How could we, how are these two things, how might they be connected? Also notice a diamond is forever is connected to light. Perhaps another angle here is that there are so many perspectives when you look into a diamond. And perhaps that might have some connection as well to Purim. But let's get back to our source sheet to try to understand the meaning of this concept that Purim is forever. And I just want to throw out a few more questions here, which I think are relevant. Let's look at the Rambam first. The Rambam Hilchot Megillah v'Chanukah Perek Bet Halacha Yudchet. This is the last halacha in the Rambam's category of halachot related to these two rabbinic holidays. Kol Sifrei HaNeviim v'Chol HaKtuvim Atidin Libatel Yimot HaMashiach. All of the books in Nevi'im and Ktuvim, not in the Torah, but Nevi'im and Ktuvim will be nullified in the times of Mashiach, chutz miMegillat Esther, except for Megillat Esther. Harei kayemet kechamisha chumshei Torah. That will continue to exist just like the 5 books of Moses. Ukihilchot shel Torah sheba'al peh she'enan betilim le'olam, and like all the laws of Torah sheba'al peh, the oral law, that will also continue forever. Shekol zikaron hatzarot yivatel, even though all the memory of these tzarot, these persecutions, will cease, as it says in Sefer Yeshayahu, ki nishkechu hatzarot harishanot v'chi nisteru be'einai, all the tzarot will be forgotten. Yimei hapurim lo yivatlu, the days of Purim will not be forgotten. Shene'emar, as it says, these days of Purim, again, same pasuk that we saw in the earlier source. Now, here the Rambam is quoting 2 different notions, which he combines together, coming from 2 different sources. One comes from our Midrash Mishlei, which teaches us that the holiday, the Chag of Purim, will continue to exist. What we'll cease, according to the Rambam, what we'll cease is the tzarot. The memory of the tzarot will cease, okay? But the Chagim itself, we will continue to celebrate them according to the Rambam. Where's this notion about the other books of Tanakh? Sefer Shmuel, Sefer Melachim, Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel. will cease to exist. Where does that come from? That actually comes from another source in the Yerushalmi. Let's look at the Yerushalmi quoted by the Hegyod Maimoniot. This is a commentary on the Rambam. And it says as follows. Yerushalmi Garcinan Rabbi Yochanan Vreish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, HaNevi'im v'Haktuvim atidim livatel. The Nevi'im and the Ktuvim will cease to exist. We won't study them anymore. The Hey Sidrei Torah Einan atin livatel, but the 5 books of Tanakh, of the Torah, will continue to exist. Eitan, what's the reason for this? Kol gadol v'lo yasaf. He quotes a pasuk of this voice that continues but never ceases. That's the Torah. Whereas Reish Lakish says, Af Megillat Esther. The halachot ein atidin livatel. Even Megillat Esther will not cease to exist. Machloket in the Yerushalmi. Reish Lakish versus Rabbi Yochanan. Will all the books of Nevi'im and Ketuvim cease to exist, or just the book of Megillat Esther? Now, I will tell you something I remember learning with Dr. Micha Goodman, where he's actually teaching once that the prime minister, I think Netanyahu still does this, certainly Menachem Begin did. Menachem Begin had a study group once a week of Tanakh, group of Tanakh teachers and scholars. He would study with them. I think either Ruby Rivlin does it or Netanyahu. I think maybe it's Rivlin, maybe it's the president. And so Micha Goodman went to teach once he went to the presidential presidential home of I think it was Ruby Rivlin at the time. And what he taught was the following idea, that the truth is that the story of Tanakh is a failure. It's a failure. It's one big failure. The Jewish people come from Egypt with all these great dreams and this vision of being a people living in their own land. We get to the land, but it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. And all of Sefer Shmuel and Sefer Shoftim and Sefer Yoshua and Sefer Melachim is the story of how we failed to create a Jewish government, a Jewish sovereignty, Jewish entity in the land of Israel. Tanakh ends as a failure, as a disappointment. And perhaps the last story of Tanakh, Megillat Esther, happens in Chutz La'aretz. Doesn't even take place in Eretz Yisrael. So you could understand, if you want to understand why these books will be rid of, why we won't study them anymore, because they weren't supposed to happen. It's what went wrong. It's all the stuff that wasn't supposed to happen. Talking about a diamond forever, we could talk about 2 different things that happen in marriage. Okay, there's all these dreams and all this vision that the couple have, and aspirations, and then there's the real life stuff. Okay, when you're yelling at each other because they didn't do the dishes last night, and when someone didn't take out the garbage, and when you're sitting in traffic and you're not going to make it to the wedding on time, and whose fault is it? Is it your fault? Is it my fault? And the kid just threw up in the car, and there's poop, and there's all these things. There's the diamond is forever, the shiny, glossy part of marriage, and there's the very real part of marriage. Okay, which is the the stuff that happens in life, and really ultimately what determines whether a marriage works is whether you can get through the tough stuff, not whether you could, do okay when a husband buys his wife a beautiful diamond ring. Everyone's very happy at those moments. It's later on that we have to figure out whether the marriage is going to work. And so there's, you can understand this notion that the Nevi'im and Tuvim that we won't study them anymore because they weren't supposed to happen. Okay, it's when everything goes wrong, so we don't study that. But however, Megillat Esther appears to be an exception, according to Reish Lakish. That still will be studied. And so the Rambam in this source, in Hilchot Megillah v'Chanukah, sort of speaks about both the eternity of the days of Chanukah, the Purim, which we'll continue to celebrate. And he also talks about the eternity of Megillat Esther, okay, that it will still be a bestseller on the shelf. You'll still be available on Kindle and Amazon. It will never cease to be printed. We'll always have it. Now, what we need to understand is what is unique specifically about Purim that we're going to continue to celebrate it for so long. And I just want to point out that there appear to be certain aspects of Purim which would make you think the opposite, that there's something chaser, something lacking in Purim. Purim is not the ultimate holiday. Purim is the Jewish holiday that really is lacking in celebration, or lacking in fulfillment and completion. Why do I say this? I'll give you a few examples. At the end of Megillat Esther, we're told that Mordechai is raised up, and it says, At the end, we're more what's the last words? The Ki Mordechai HaYehudi Mishneh LaMelech Achashverosh V'Gadol LaYehudim V'Ratzui L'Rov Echav. Mordechai was second to the king, and he was accepted, he was welcomed by most of the Jews. Most of the Jews, but not everybody. Not everyone liked Mordechai. Not everybody was so happy with all his political machinations and his connection to the king. There's an indication, a little crack, just a little crack in Megillat Esther, that something is not 100%. Number two, do we recite Hallel on Purim? And we know the answer to that question. We do not recite Hallel. There is an opinion in the Meiri of Menachem HaMeiri, 14th century provincial scholar, who says that if you're not reading Megillat Esther, you should say Hallel, but we don't say Hallel. Why don't we say Hallel? So there's a famous shita, and this is in Masechet Megillah, Daf Yud Daled, that Rava says that when it comes to Yitziat Mitzrayim, we recite Hallel on Pesach because we had been the servants of Paro, and then we were servants of Hashem. We became Avdei Hashem. He says, but when it came to Megillat Esther and Purim, Akati Avdei Achashverosh Anan. We still, we reached a neutral point at the end of Megillat Esther. We weren't going to be destroyed. That was undone. Was anything positive created? We were still living in Achashverosh's kingdom. We were still subjects to Achashverosh, and we were still pervious or endangered, in a sense, that the assimilation of, the assimilationist tendencies of the Jewish people, there was not a full victory. Even furthermore, it happened in Chutz La'aretz. It's another reason why we don't say Hallel on Purim. There was a major cost to this victory. The Jewish people, because of assimilation, they were celebrating the parties of Achashverosh. All this happened. So there are all these compromises that the Jewish people make, and we end up sort of emerging victorious. But maybe it was a Pyrrhic victory. Maybe there were too many losses on the other side. Esther herself had to compromise herself. She had to marry Achashverosh. That's how we achieved redemption, by Esther, a beautiful young Jewish girl marrying the king, this disgusting, revolting human being, Achashverosh. Furthermore, there's an important character missing from Megillat Esther, and that is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How could you suggest that this is an ideal book, or that this is the ultimate celebration when God is missing from this story? So there's really a lot that is chaser about Megillat Esther, and that's chaser in our celebration of Purim. That is sort of strange that you would think that this Chag of all Chagim would become the Chag that we continue to celebrate throughout Jewish history. I'm going to pause for a second. Now that I've raised all these questions, anybody want to just share an insight, a thought about how we might explain this issue?
If I can say, I think that Purim represents very, very many things. First of all, we remember Purim because if we go to Hashem Hashem Erachum V'Chanun and look on the end, Elkanah Poked Avot Banim HaShleshim. When everything is perfect, we tend to forget that things can go wrong. And Purim has come to show us you are now, like today, even today, Am Nivchar, Gar, B'Chofesh, B'Artzo, considered a respected member of the family of Amim, a strong, independent nation, and yet at the same time, don't get so uppity. Things can go wrong. Galut can come back. Things can go wrong. Okay. Don't forget. And I think the other thing is just one other thing. The mention of God, the mention of Hashem is, you don't always have to see Hashem to know that he is there. We know that Hashem watches us. We know that Hashem takes care of us. He doesn't have to come and tell us.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. One more statement. Anyone have another comment or idea they want to share? Okay, good. Let's move on. So let's continue studying the sources. What I want to do is I want to share with you, let me just give you a roadmap. I want to share with you a few different readings of this idea of what it means that Purim will be eternal. Okay, and then we will look at Rav Yitzchak Hutner in particular and focus on a very deep idea that he shares. So we start with the Rambam. Okay, we already saw in the Rambam that the Shekol Zichron Hatzarot Yivatel. Purim, we will continue to celebrate Purim, and what will change is that we will, the tzarot, the persecution, the memory. This is like the Jewish, the guilt, the Jewish. What's the word I'm looking for? The memory. We hold memory as a people. We hold memory of the persecutions and the Holocaust and all the challenges that we face. These things will be forgotten, okay, in a sense, and we will continue to celebrate Purim. Okay, this is the Rambam's not immediate. He doesn't explain so much what will be remembered, what will be continued, but the Ravid though points out in his comment to the Rambam. Look at the Ravid here, right over here. Amar Avraham, Davar Hedyo Tuze. Basically, I disagree with the Rambam. He says, first of all, we're never going to stop printing the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim. They're going to continue forever. It's possible that we're going to, we're never going to stop reading Megillat Esther in a public fashion. We will always read Megillat Esther. This is the meaning of this. What the Ravid is essentially saying is that the other books of Nevi'im will continue to exist. He's minimizing the difference between all the other books and Esther. It's not that the rest of Nevi'im and Ketuvim are going to be thrown out and the only thing that will exist is Megillat Esther, but everything will exist. We'll just continue to read Megillat Esther in public. Okay, that's the Ravid's reading of this. Let's look at the Shut HaRashba, Chelek Aleph, Siman Tzadik Gimel. The Rashba, Rav Shimon ben Aderet. Okay, he's a 13th century scholar in northern Spain. Okay, he wants to understand what does it mean that he's a very fundamental question. We believe that the Torah is nitzchi, it's eternal. It will never cease to exist. The mitzvot, every mitzvah is eternal. So how do we explain the fact that all the chagim are going to be, undone? How do we explain this? And he says, "Va'afilu kotso shel yud," meaning we don't even cut out a yud from the Torah. All the more so all the chagim. He says there are all these different explanations. I don't know what any of this means. He says even more so. You want to say that Yom Kippur will continue to exist because it says that it's called a chok. Guess what? Pesach is also called a chok. So maybe we should also continue to celebrate Pesach. So what's his explanation here? Al Kaimir Eli, Perusho, Shekol HaMoadim lo yiftiach aliyem yiparach shelo yigrom hachet bitulam be'achad min hazmanim. He says it's possible that at some point, because of our sins, we will not be able to celebrate some of the chagim. It says, Shachach Hashem b'tzion moed v'shabbat. Hashem is caused to be forgotten in Tzion, Moed, the Chagim, and Shabbat. Aval b'mei Purim, Yiftiach, Hashem promised, it's a promise. The Katuv, lo ya'avru mitoch hayudim v'zichram lo yasuf mizaram, lo ya'avru, v'lo yasuf, asaum haftacha v'lo azhara. Hashem promised us we will always celebrate Purim. It's not a warning that you have to celebrate Purim every year. It's just a promise that this will never cease, no matter how bad things are for the Jewish people. Again, the Rashba is minimizing the difference between all the other Chagim and Purim. It's not that the other Chagim are going to be undone and there will be no more Pesach and no more Sukkot and no more Shavuot. They'll still exist. But in unusual circumstances where we are persecuted, even in those times, we will celebrate, we will always celebrate Purim. The same thing he says is true is also of Yom Kippur. I don't want to bring up this example. It may not be a great example, but we certainly didn't cease from celebrating Purim last year. Okay, it was, and I think that was a Pyrrhic celebration. That's actually when so much of Corona spread in Jewish communities around the world. Please God, this year it won't, even though people are planning on celebrating this Purim. But I don't think that's what the Rashba is referring to. But he's saying Purim will always be in our hearts. We'll always have Purim, even in times of persecution. Okay, that's another explanation of this idea. let's look at a third. So we've seen the Rambam, we've seen the Ravid, we've seen the Rashba. Let's now look at the Maharal Miprag. Okay, what does the Maharal Miprag say about this? 1 second. Maharal says, he says as follows. Okay, the Im Tishal, and he sort of connects to why Purim and Yom Kippur, why these two. The Im Tishal, lama elu shnei moadim lo yu b'telim, davar ze lefi inyan elu hamitzvot. It's because of these particular types of mitzvot. Ki inyan elu moadim hem kmo hatchiyah. Both of these, there is a form of resurrection. She'achar shehigi'o l'mitayach seru l'chaim kiba rishona. Both by Yom Kippur and Purim, it's like we died and we come back to life. L'chein Yom Kippurim shadam asher chotev v'nigzer alav mitah. A person sins, and it's decreed a person's going to die. Yom Kippur atones, and we're given life back again. So it's like we come back to life. We go from me'afela le'ora, in a sense, from darkness to light, from death to life. And that's another reason why we wear a kittel. Some people wear a kittel on Yom Kippur because it signifies death. Purim asher higio lechered chazar liot hachayut. אין ספק שהגיע להם דבר זה ממדרגה עליונה שממנה החיות שלו בטבע. החיות הטבעי כבר נגזר על זה אמיתה. אי אפשר רק שפתח להם השם יתברך שער העליון אשר ממנו חזר להם החיים. What he says is that the resurrection, life itself, the resuscitation that we experience after Purim when we were almost destroyed by Haman, and the near-death experience of Yom Kippur, clearly, this is coming from some other portal in heaven which goes beyond, which transcends and defies normal and natural occurrences. And that's the connection between Purim and Yom Kippur. And what we're saying is that this range of salvation, of going from death, essential, almost near death, to life, is unique to Purim. It's unique to Yom Kippur, and therefore he says, therefore, in the time of the resurrection of the dead, okay, it's part of that world. These two chagim come from another world, the world of Tchiyat HaMetim, and from the power, the koach, in the resurrection of the dead. And so these chagim will still be celebrated in the times of the resurrection of the dead. Again, the Maharal is also minimizing the meaning of the statement that only Purim will continue to be celebrated, because again, he's saying, this is in the future, after Tchiyat HaMetim, after resurrection of the dead. But in this world, the way things exist right now, we will still be celebrating Purim, even in Bimot HaMashiach, it sounds like. It's just in the time of the resurrection that we will stop. So again, all of these explanations, the common denominator among them is that they all minimize the meaning of the statement, because it's very hard to imagine that parts of the Torah would be undone or that would be made null and void, especially the Chagim, which are so important to our lives as Jews. So we move on to the next interpretation, okay? And now we're going to look at the Torah Tamima, the Baruch Halevi Epstein, and Rav Chaim David Halevi, who was the the late Sfaradi chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. Now, the Torah Tamima, he first quotes the Rambam. This is Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein. He's actually the son of the author of the Aruch HaShulchan, Rav Yechiel Michal Halevi Epstein, who was a great posek in Europe. Now, Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein tells us as follows: Kivi demashma me Rambam sof Hilchot Megillah, heve haperush shezichron hatzarot mikol hamoadim yu betelim shelo yizkaru od. כמו שנאמר, כי נשכחו הצרות ראשונות, אבל זיכרון עניין פורים לעולם יישאר קיים, ואם קיבלה היא נקבל. Okay, this is actually useful because it clarifies what he believes the Rambam is saying. That the Rambam says the memory of all the previous tzarot from all the other chagim we'll see is it just only by Purim will we remember the tragedy and the near-death experience, and then the salvation. Okay, so Jews, we will be able to let go of that sense of persecution, all the anti-Semitism that all the chagim are connected to. That will cease to exist. Okay, but again, the Rambam still believes that all the chagim will be celebrated. So again, Rambam's another example of minimizing the statement, this radical statement in Midrash Mishlei. Uripi Abba Mari Shlita. And I was going to quote his father, who was still living at the time. Again, this is the Aruch HaShulchan. Shamati Lefaresh. Da Kavanai Devazeh Chaluk Nes Purim Inisei Sha'ar Moadim. The miracle of Purim is different than the miracle of other Chagim. Yetziat Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, Ananei Kavod B'Sukkot, whether it's the Exodus, the reception of the Torah, the Ananei Kavod that we have by Sukkot, Devaod Jehem Ayum Nisim Gluim. These were revealed, publicly revealed miracles. She'ein lihistapek bahem, that one, there's no doubt that they exist. In contrast, when it came to Purim, even though all of it was from Hashem, it was all done through natural means. Therefore, for a person who has doubts about Jewish faith, you could interpret all these events naturally or through the lens of faith. Okay, sort of two paths. Okay, and if what this is really saying is that even if publicly revealed miracles will cease, natural miracles, okay, will continue. And if you look at history, the annals of history, you look at the Jewish people, the story of Jewish people, you can see this. So the Torah Tamima is taking this notion and telling us that it's not so much that Purim will continue to be celebrated. We'll celebrate all these Chagim, again, minimizing this notion that's presented in Midrash Mishlei. But what's going to be different? What's going to be different is that it's how God engages with the world. That will be different. What will be different is that no more revealed miracles, that Purim portends changed relationship or changed status in the world, that there will be hidden miracles, concealed miracles, but no public miracles. Okay, and this he believes you can see when you study history. It's maybe proof that one should study history because you could see Yad Hashem in history. Okay, now let's look at one more piece before we get to Rav Hutner. Okay, any questions at this point? Anyone have questions, comments? Just if you have something you want to share. Okay, good. Let's continue. So now shoot asay l'charav chelek chet siman lemhei. This is Rav Chaim David Halevi, Sephardi rabbi, big Talmid Chacham, wrote many Sfarim, many Sheilot Utshuvot. And first he basically says that the Rambam changes the meaning of the Midrash in Mishlei, which we've already pointed out. The Rambam interprets it differently. The Rambam doesn't think all the Moadim will be undone or be forgotten. And then he quotes the Bnei Yisachar. Bnei Yisachar is a Hasidic interpretation, commentary. He's one of the earlier Hasidic Rebbeim. Actually curious, I'm just trying to remember who it is. If anyone, okay, it's the Rav Tzvi Elimelech Shapiro of Dinov. Okay, lives from 1783 to 1841. Okay, so he and in the Bnei Yisachar, so he quotes the Bnei Yisachar that who brings a similar interpretation to the Torah Tamima. Let's just look at it inside. And he says basically as follows: that Sipru lanu Chazal. I'm reading it from over here. Purim will not become will not be forgotten. How could this be possible that all the Chagim will be forgotten? Hashem is not going to change the Torah. Even if this were to happen, why is Purim so important? It appears to me. This is the Bnei Yisachar. Hine amru Chazal bepasuk lo ya'amer od chai Hashem asher ha'alat Yisrael miMitzrayim ki im v'gomer v'darshuvo lo shetaker yitziat Mitzrayim mikoma ela shetehei shiabul malchiot ikar v'yitziat Mitzrayim tafel. He says, listen, Yitziat Mitzrayim is the shining moment in Jewish history, no doubt. But that will be eclipsed by a greater light in the future. we'll still celebrate Yetziat Mitzrayim. And all the Chagim that connect to it, and so many of the Chagim do connect to it, Shavuot and Sukkot, they all surround Yetziat Mitzrayim. והנה הפסוק צבח לא יאמר עוד וכולי, וצריך לומר, שלא נהיה ניכר סיפור יציאת מצרים לפני לעומת סיפור ניסים דשיבור מלכויות. והוא כדמיון דבר המתבטל בשישים, אשר הוא כלא היה. על כן נקרא לא יאמר, היינו שכאילו לא יאמר כאינן ביטול בשישים, והנה כל המועדים, what he's saying is that, listen, all the Chagim will continue to exist, no doubt. We're going to celebrate Pesach and Shavuot. Don't worry, you can still go to Pesach, to Italy for Pesach, and you can go to the King David for Sukkot and Yerushalayim. You can do all these things. Don't worry about it. But they will be batel b'shishim. The memory of Yetziat Mitzrayim will be eclipsed by the future redemption, which will be that much greater. Okay, and the future redemption is represented by Purim itself. Okay, so this is what he suggests. So again, Purim now represents the future in a sense, the future redemption, whereas these Chagim present the first redemption, which is Yetziat Mitzrayim, and one will eclipse the other, although they will still both exist. So the point is that the other Chagim relative to Purim and the future redemption will be less significant, but they'll still exist. And now Rav Chaim David Halevi, this is the last source before we look at the Pachad Yitzchak. Ula'anyu dati, ha'hesber lahadmadat yimei Purim gam yimei hagula la'atid avo. That Purim will continue to exist even in time of redemption. Novad mimahut ha'neshin ha'aseh Yisrael b'ot hayamim. It stems from the nature of the miracle in their time. She says, from a geographic standpoint, what was unique in Purim time was that everybody was clustered in one place. They were all part of Achashverosh's kingdom. And therefore, there was a real threat. Because if Haman succeeded, lahashmid, laharog, ulabed, et kol ha'Yehudim, minar, ve'ad zaken ta'af, v'nashim b'yom achad. If Haman succeeded at his plot to kill the Jewish people, it would be very easy to do. Because everyone is in part of one kingdom, and you have one policy and one final solution would have been very, very effective. Okay? Now, Rav Chaim David Halevi points out that after the Purim story, we were always spread out throughout the world and dispersed in exile. And this is a blessing. Why was this a blessing? Because as much as dispersion meant exile, it also protected us. Why? Because if the Jews of Mongolia are killed, the Jews of Italy still exist. And the Jews of Italy are kicked out, the Jews of Germany are still there. And the Jews of, so to some degree, this is our insurance. You know what our insurance is? Insurance for the Jewish people is that we live in every single country and we're spread out and we don't join together and we don't create our own country and don't live in Israel, because we're much safer. The continuity of the Jewish people is more secure if we're not all living in the same place. You know, I've thought about this idea before. Now I'm a big Zionist, as we all are. But if you think about this idea, there's something crazy about the fact that we are encouraging all of our friends and all of our family to come to Israel, to come specifically to Israel. And we are the only country in the world which is now under threat of an Iranian nuclear bomb, okay, which exists now, will exist, who knows, chas v'shalom. You know, it's like a crazy thing that we're going to bring all the Jews under one locale, but, you know, and now we understand why we believe in this. This is kibbutz galiyot. This is our commandment. Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, you have to make aliyah. But if you think about it from an existential standpoint, okay, take yourself outside of Jewish faith for a second, say, wait a second, that's a pretty crazy thing for the Jews to do, because we're going to all be in one place. It's much easier to kill and attack and eradicate the Jewish people from the face of the earth. Hitler would have loved if we would all be in one location. In fact, the reason it was so easy to kill Jews in the Holocaust was because of literally decades of communist Russian and German, policy that the Jews had to stay in the Pale of Settlement. Jews wanted to get out. We couldn't get out. But if we could have gotten out, much fewer Jews would have been killed by the Nazi extermination camps. So, what Rav Chaim David Halevi is saying is that, well, what will continue to exist is get the right here. Well, will continue to exist. The miracle of Purim is that even when we are joined together in one place, don't worry. Don't worry, because the miracle of Purim that we were saved will continue to stay with us. ולכן הנס בפורים היה כה גדול שגם הגאולה העתידה עם כל הניסים שהתלוו אליה לא יחלישו את עוצמתו וחשיבותו ההיסטורית. Okay, we'll be together, but we will not be threatened by being together. Okay, so please God, this should be true. It is all based actually on something we saw in Daf Yomi recently, Psachim Pei Zayin. Hashem, did us a good deed by separating us amongst the nations, because it means we can never be fully destroyed. But the point that what will remain from the Nes of Purim in the future is that we will be able to be together, all in one location, in Eretz Yisrael, in Medinat Yisrael, please God, and we won't be threatened as a people. The continuity of the people will not be at stake. This is Rav Chaim David Halevi. Again, every one of the interpretations that we've seen so far limit this idea and minimize this notion of the Chagim, of ceasing to celebrate the rest of the Chagim. But the question is, what is it that Purim that we could extract from Chag Purim that is meaningful, that's special, that's unique, that will somehow represent a changed reality in future times? Now let's move on to Rav Yitzchak. Rav Yitzchak Hutner was a great Rosh Yeshiva in America in the last century. He was a teacher of he was like a contemporary of Rav Soloveitchik, for example. He was a student at one point of Rav Soloveitchik. I'm just seeing. Okay, interesting question. Weren't there Jews in Israel during the times of Megillah? There certainly were, but the population was considerably smaller. Okay, we don't know exact numbers. The Persian period in Jewish history is a period we don't know very much about. When Megillat Esther took place is also a question, but we're talking about something about 400 or 500, BC, during that period of time. Okay, so and Rav Yitzchak Hutner again was a student of Rav Kook at some point in time. He established a yeshiva here in New York. Rav Lichtenstein, for example, is a talmid of Yitzchak Hutner. If I'm not mistaken, Rav Hutner studied in Slobodka. If I'm not mistaken, let me just pull this up on Wikipedia. Okay, lives from 1906 to 1980, and he'd studied in Slobodka at one point, and he was in Hebron during the 1929 massacres. And he was friends with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, with Rav Soloveitchik in Europe. He was in University of Berlin, perhaps it's possible. Anyway, he was the head of Yeshiva Rav Chaim Berlin, okay, in Brooklyn. Okay, and he was very famous for giving these, for giving these ma'amarim. He would give these drashot on the Chagim. And these different volumes, they're really deep Torah, in which he would combine Hasidish and Misnagdish Torah. Another interesting fact about his life, he was on the plane that was seized from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine terrorists in the Dawson's Field hijackings. Okay, so he did survive this, but he was on the plane at the time. Okay, let's get back to this piece. This is Inyan Lamed Daled of Purim of Rav Yitzchak Hutner. V'zichram lo yasuf mizaram, and its memory of Purim will never cease. Afilu bizman shekol ha'moadim yitpatlu, Purim lo yitpatlu. Even when all the moadim will be forgotten or be null and void, Purim will not be. Shene'amar v'zichram lo yasuf mizaram. Mahalach ha'inanim b'derech zeh. Mashal l'shnei b'nei adam. He brings a beautiful parable. Shenitztavu la'akir nashim b'layla. Their job is to recognize people at night. So it's dark at night. There are no lights. What do you do? One person lights a candle, lights a light, a flashlight, and then he can see people walking by. So this is his way to deal with the darkness. That makes a lot of sense. We probably all follow that path. But the second guy doesn't have light. And he needs to recognize the people. So what's he going to do? Okay, he trains himself to be able to recognize them, without light. Okay, v'nimtza l'inyan habrirut v'habirut harishon adif min hasheni. In terms of clarity, the first option is much better. You have proper light shining on the people's faces so that you can see them. Shaharei hakarat adam b'chush ha'riyah yoter brura me'asher hakarat adam b'chush ha'shmiyah. It's much easier to recognize a person through seeing them than maybe by hearing them, by listening to their voices. But the second one has an advantage over the first. What is the advantage of the second one? He strengthened his ability to listen, or even perhaps to see. Sometimes you learn how to see in darkness. Okay, when you're sitting at night, you're reading a book, and when someone turns off the lights immediately, you can't see. Okay, but as your pupils dilate, you could actually see considerably more in the dark. And what he's saying is that the person here develops their ability to hear. So if you can't see, at least learn to hear better. And we know this is true, by the way, of people who become blind or deaf. Their other senses become much stronger. Sense of touch. A blind person's sense of touch is much more powerful and sensitive than a person who can see. But the second has an advantage. And the first one used a candle. This first guy who had a candle, he won't recognize people's voices through hearing. And afterwards, when the sun rises, and the first guy's going to turn off his flashlight or burn out his candle. What do you need a candle for during the day? Now, the flashlight is no longer helpful in any way. He hasn't gained any skill. He hasn't improved his ability to recognize, to do his job in the daytime. Or he hasn't changed. He hasn't changed his hearing skills. His seeing is not better. The second guy, second guy also can see the people. The second person has developed certain listening skills. He could hear the difference between people's different voices and pitch and tone. He could tell the difference. He's a better hearing skills at this point. So he's developed a certain skill which the first person did not. The first person has a crutch, and that is a flashlight, a light. The second person didn't rely on that. So he's himself transformed to be able to hear or see in the dark. Yes. Okay, I'm seeing there's a question here, which I'll address afterwards. Okay, now part 2. Okay, V'hinei. V'shana me'uberet korinat ha'megillah ba'adar sheni. So he's going to use this mashal, this parable of a person who sees at night by using a light versus a person who develops a skill of seeing when it's dark or hearing when it's dark, that there's a fundamental difference between these two people. Okay. When there's an extra month in the year, we celebrate Megillah, we read the Megillah and celebrate Purim on the second Adar Sheni. Okay. I'll just tell you a story. I once had a bet with a friend. And the person who lost the bet had to travel to 770 late at night and pay and just go there. That was the bet. I lost the bet, so I had to go to 770. And I get there at like 10 o'clock at night. This is Brooklyn. I was in Manhattan at the time. I was at University of Manhattan, and we get there like 10 o'clock at night, Daven Maariv, and when was this? This was in Adar Aleph. This was like, I don't know, 5th day of Adar Aleph. This is about 40 days before Purim. The guys were all singing and dancing and drinking and all these posters of the Rebbe who died, of course, and it was a crazy, but okay, some people celebrate even in Adar Rishon, but we halachically celebrate from Adar Bet. Why do we dafka read Megillah? Why do we celebrate the second Purim? We want to connect Purim to Pesach, which is the next month. Just like the redemption from Egypt has its own Anochi. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher tzitzicha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim. I am Hashem your God. Okay, Anochi asher tzitzicha me'eretz Mitzrayim. Kemo ken yesh la gam negulat Purim Anochi Mishala. Purim also has its own Anochi. What's the Anochi of Purim? There's no Anochi in the Megillah. Anochi Haster Astir. It's Hashem saying, I will conceal myself. And the Gemara asks, Esther Minatar Minayin Shnemar Anochi Haster Astir. Klamar Shtei Drachim Yesh La Likneset Yisrael Lakir Anochi. The Jewish people have two ways to recognize the Anochi Hashem in this world. Ayidei Gulat Mitzrayim, Ve'od Ayidei Gulat Purim, through Mitzrayim and Purim. What's the difference between them? Ha'akara shekenet Yisrael makirat Anochi Ayidei Tzim Mitzrayim, hi dugmat ha'adam ha'makirat chavero be'ezrat kli or shenitan lo. Recognizing Hashem through Mitzrayim is like the guy who turns on the flashlight at night. There's this light, the shining light of Yetziat Mitzrayim, which is the miracles of Yam Suf, and the Eser Hamakot, and Hashem coming down and saving the Jewish people, Biyad HaChazaka. Ve'ilu, ha'akara shekenet Yisrael makirat anochi ayidei gulad Esther astir, hi dugmat ha'akara she'adam makir chavero ayidei shlamad et atzmo lahakiro be'ezrat chush acher milvad chush ha'riyah. However, the ability to encounter and recognize Hashem through Purim is like the hidden Anochi, because there it's through developing another skill, a hearing or ability to see in the dark, about developing a deeper ability to listen and to hear. Umeata namshich kavhala likishe'aleh mud hashachar, when the sun rises, v'shemesh teitzei b'gvorata v'orsha gilui elokut yesh shivatayim k'orach hama, when the sun rises and godliness will be felt in the world in a much stronger way. Ki az bevadai she'otam kli ha'or shekenet Yisrael hayta zikuka lehem mikodem yitbatlu b'derech mimela. And therefore, in the future times, in redemptive times, when God's presence will be felt in a much stronger way, in a much more direct way, so we're not going to need the memory of Yetziat Mitzrayim and all the Chagim connected to it. That will be batel, will be forgotten, because we're going to feel God's presence directly. All the Moadim will be radically eclipsed by the light of the Geula, because one light will clearly outshine the other light. But that's only for the track of the Moadim that connect to Mitzrayim. And all the other Moadim connect are sort of derivative or successive Chagim that connect to Mitzrayim itself. And that's an important line. But Purim, where we, the Jewish people, taught ourselves that we could recognize God even in concealment and darkness. This will surely remain an acquisition, an eternal acquisition of the Jewish people, even when the light of Geula comes. Wow. What is Rav Yitzchak Hutner saying? He's saying that what fundamentally changes, what does Purim represent? Purim represents a transformation of us, that we develop that ability to listen, to hear. We're like the guard at night who doesn't have a flashlight, who doesn't have a candle, but who develops the ability to listen, to hear. That even when God is concealed, even in moments of Hester, even in a time, a reality of concealment, of divine concealment, we could recognize God and see God's hand in the world. We could interpret very deep events. We could see the hidden hand of Hashem, even when it's not immediately visible, even when it's not concrete, even when it's not tangible, or even when it's not immediate or self-evident. We will be able to read between the lines, to read beneath the surface, to see the subplot that animates the plot that is above the surface. We develop that skill and that ability, and that is the transformation of Purim. That Purim is about training, limda b'nei Yisrael, that we trained ourselves to see God's hand even when it's not fully present. And there's something very, very powerful about this notion. And what Rav Hutner is essentially saying is that what does it mean? It's the skill that we develop from celebrating Purim that will stay with us. We're like the guard who learned to listen better, who learned to strain his eyes and see better even in darkness, whose pupils dilate and doesn't need the light. He doesn't need the flashlight in order to see. Now, the reason this is so powerful is because we are living in a world in which Purim is the dominant reality. We're living in a world where there are no nisim gluyim, there are no revealed miracles, and therefore our ability to stay strong, our ability to develop emunah and faith and stay strong to our tradition depends on our ability to be fully attuned to the events that exist, that we have to be able to read reality. We have to be able to interpret reality, to transform ourselves, to be able to hear that pin drop, even if it doesn't ring as loud, even if it's not as present or as complete as the Geula of Mitzrayim. And that's the Geula of Purim. Sort of Shoshana, as you said a little bit, Purim is this partial redemption. And therefore it trains us to be able to see the glimmers of light, to see the cracks of light that shine through. This is not something that a person needs to develop the skill, the right clarity of mind. A person needs to develop their emunah and put on the mask of emunah in a sense, to be able to see God's hand in the world. Now, where I want to go with this is, and I'll give you an example. Whenever I talk to bar mitzvah kids in shul, and I talk to them about the importance of, they learn their own parasha, but I tell them they have to continue learning afterwards. You know why? Because if you just learn your own bar mitzvah parasha, so then you've developed a certain content knowledge. You know how to learn your bar mitzvah parasha, and maybe you'll learn it, every year for, here on. But when you continue learning, your ability to read the Torah becomes a skill. And that's what Rav Hutner is getting at, that we develop a skill. I'm going to quote my Aunt Raz. My Aunt Raz, she should live and be well. We try to teach her how to use the computer, okay? And she's not so willing to learn how to do it. So she keeps her computer on the email. It's always on the email screen, and then it goes to sleep, and then she puts it back. But if you move anything away from email, she has no idea what to do. So she knows how to use Gmail on her computer, but she doesn't know how to go from Gmail to Google Chrome, or from Google Chrome to a game, or from Google to he doesn't know how to use any of the websites. There's no skill, there's just a certain content knowledge. And the point of Purim is to develop that skill. That's what Purim is about. Now, I want to take this one step further, okay, and quote to you something from Rabbi Norman Lamb, the beautiful, beautiful drasha that he gave and delivered in 1968. I think it's at the Jewish Center at the time, and it's based on a famous Gemara in Masechet Shabbat in Peichet. The Gemara in Masechet Shabbat tells us the famous midrash that Har Sinai, Kafa Aleim Har Kigigit, Hashem held a mountain above the Jewish people, and by doing this, he forced us, he coerced us to receive the Torah. Now the Gemara goes on to say, but wait a second. If we were coerced, then we have the right to rebel and say, well, we don't accept this because it was against our will. But the Gemara then goes on to say, but in the time of Mordechai and Esther, we accepted the Torah with our own free will. So we were forced to accept the Torah in the beginning, but then in Megillat Esther, we receive it, we choose to receive the Torah. And again, this is about developing that skill that Rav Hutner is talking about. And Rabbi Norman Lamb is a fascinating piece here, a drasha called Neither Here Nor There, okay? And what he basically says is he wants to know what is unique about the Purim experience, that was the time when we reaccepted the Torah, when we took it on with free choice and free will without coercion. And he says, you know what? In history, in Jewish history, there are times when we are forced to do things. We're forced to choose a particular path. in Yetziat Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, it was impossible not to receive the Torah. That's what that Gemara is really saying. With God's presence so strongly felt, and God revealing himself in Har Sinai, in Yetziat Mitzrayim, you couldn't not receive the Torah. And to some degree, that took away our free will because you couldn't say no. It was impossible to say no. The same thing is true in times of crisis. Times like the Holocaust. The Holocaust, and he references this in the Drasha. Also, a person loses their faith in the Holocaust. In some ways, one's free will is also taken away in those moments. Okay, so our free will is taken away in moments of divine revelation and divine concealment. In both of these extremes, we no longer really have free will to do as we choose. When do we have free will? During times when it's neither here nor there. When it's neither divine revelation like Har Sinai or the Holocaust. Okay, let's look inside. However, if freedom is denied to us both in revelation and withdrawal, if there's no praise for believing in God in the time of his presence and no blame for doubting him during his absence, if both fortune and misfortune, happiness and tragedy are equally coercive, if in each set of circumstances our attitude to Torah is considered involuntary, when then do we accept the Torah out of freedom? And when is our loyalty praiseworthy and our Kabbalat HaTorah valid? The answer is when God is neither present or absent, when he neither conceals nor reveals himself, when fortune neither smiles at us nor frowns at us. In a word, our freedom is greatest when life is neither here nor there. For then, and only then, do we have genuine options to accept God and Torah or to deny them, to choose the way of life and blessing or the way of death and evil. And it is this situation that of neither here nor there that prevailed during the Purim episode. The victory of the Jews over Haman and the frustration of his nefarious plot was a surprising triumph and showed that God had not abandoned us. But there were no miracles either, no clear and indisputable proof that God was present and responsible for our victory. That is why the book of Esther is included in the Bible, and yet is the only book in which the name of God is not mentioned. That is why the rabbis maintain that the very name Esther is indicative of the hiding of God, the lack of his full revelation of presence. The Megillah itself, it is often said that in crisis, it is often said that in crisis in the extraordinary, okay, so that's the point he wants to say. Purim is neither here nor there, and therefore we have the true opportunity to accept the Torah with free will. It is often said that in crisis, in the extraordinary moments of life, you can test the true character of a man. I do not believe that this is true except if his reaction is contrary to expectations. A man is, for instance, responds heroically to a time of tragedy, he may be commended. But if he falls apart in extreme adversity, he cannot be condemned. He simply was not free to do otherwise. The same holds true in reverse situations. One who is friendly and charitable as a result of the miraculous recovery of a sick child may not yet be considered a man of nobility and generosity. He's almost been forced into charm and sweetness by his overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. When then can we know what a man is really like? When may he be held morally accountable for his acts and considered either guilty or praiseworthy? When he or she is free. And when he or she is free, when things are neither here nor there, when he is subject neither to elation nor depression, neither to the stress of adversity nor to the uplift of felicity. It is in the Purims of life, and we have no clear proof that God is with us or against us, that there's a special virtue to accepting the Torah. Those who come to synagogue and pray only during the occasions of Simcha, when reciting the Kaddish, are doing the right thing, but the real test comes after the Simcha or the 11 months of Kaddish. And then when other things are neither here nor there, there is a religious fiber of personality tested. Not only tested, but at that time the decisions are more meaningful, okay? What is it that, how do we connect this notion of Rabbi Norman Lamb, a really powerful piece here about true free will, that Purim was this opportunity. And what I think you could say is as follows, is that Purim represents a watershed moment in Jewish history. It's a time when Nisim Gluyim, revealed miracles are no longer exist. And therefore it creates challenges, but it also creates opportunities. It creates the opportunity to develop that ability to listen and to see even in the darkness. It creates the opportunity to exercise true free will, as Rabbi Lamb was talking about. It also creates challenges because it means we don't always feel God is present, and we don't, and we struggle in those moments of concealment. But it also means that we have the ability to develop those certain skill sets, a skill set of emunah, of finding God even if he's not revealed in a direct manner. And this is why Purim is lo yivatel olam. This is why a Purim is forever, because it gives us the ability to transform ourselves. It gives us the ability to develop our own emunah and our sensitivity to the divine rhythms and patterns in the universe, so that we can see God in the universe. And that's why it is eternal. That's why Purim is lo yivatel le'olam. And to take this back to the marriage metaphor, and I think you'll all like this. We always talk about marriage, about everybody wants to find the right object of their love. They want to find the right person to marry. But the truth is, if you want to find the right person to marry, you know how you do that? You do that by becoming the right person to marry. Okay, if you change yourself and you're the right person to marry, guys, sing Moshe and Deborah. I don't know if you're sitting in the same room. I don't know if okay, but you're okay. If you become the right person to marry, you will certainly then find the right person to marry. And so therefore, a diamond is forever. A marriage is forever when we transform ourselves. And in the language of Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, when we teach ourselves to see God in the world, then we develop that skill of emunah in a sense, and we will and we will have that forever. And that's what makes Purim forever. That's what makes a diamond forever. That's what makes a Purim forever. And Ezrat Hashem, we should all have a freilich of Purim. Purim Sameach to everybody. Pleasure learning with you all. And please God, we should get closer to the time when this period of Geula that Purim lo yivatel le'olam. So we're gonna pause the recording, but thank you all for participating. If you have any specific questions, we'll talk about that.